In today's video, I wanted to go through and discuss all of Synnolian Tunifus' quests for the Imperial cult in the Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind. His 7 quests are all part of the overarching questline for the cult. In order to even begin, the player has to enlist in the faction. You need to speak with one of 11 listed members, each one belonging to one of Vvardenfell's Imperial outposts. In my case, I was granted access into the guild by Summitus Vunus at Fort Moonmoth. By paying 50 septims, the guild dues, the player is welcomed with open arms. As for what the cult is all about, they worship the 9 divines and are essentially missionaries. Their goal is to spread the blessings of those deities all across Tamriel. They also have their own set of special quests and tasks that certain members need to carry out. Some involve combat, others involve collecting ingredients, and a select few involve collecting donations. Vunus says that those who join the guild have intentions of becoming priests and clerics, those who heal and help the less fortunate. Once the player is a member of the faction, they'll be granted the rank of layman, and your work can officially begin. Resuming the conversation with Summitus, he tells me that the cult is currently in need of almoners, lay healers, and shrine sergeants. Almoners are the dew collectors and report to Iolaus Trupter in Ebonheart. Lay healers gather ingredients and deliver potions to those who are in need. They report to Synnolian Tunifus at Ebonheart. Then, as for the shrine sergeants, they deliver packages, messages, and escort other members to dangerous places. They need to report to Kay, who's also in Ebonheart. So, leaving the conversation, it seems like there's only one place to go at this point. As per the job description, you can probably tell that Tunifus' quests aren't going to be that difficult, and in fact, are quite simple. Honestly, for all of the Imperial cult, I heard that it's a very good questline for new characters to run through. It's great at introducing you to the world, you learn a lot about skills like alchemy and restoration, and you receive a lot of decent beginner gear. Plus, to have those healing services available early on is also a really great perk. All of the quest givers for the Imperial cult are actually located in the Imperial chapels of Ebonheart, so unlike most other quest lines, there's very little travel needed in between each quest. A simple mark spell in the middle of the room should work for the rest of the story. However, for the contents of the quests themselves, the player is definitely a world traveler, as you get sent from coast to coast and everywhere in between. Arriving in the Imperial chapels, I looked around the main chamber in search of Synnolian. Not finding him with the rest of the members, I descended to the lower level and located the lay healer in the quarters section. Speaking with Synnolian, he introduced himself and asked if I was ready for my tasks as a healer. Telling him yes, he gave me a pretty simple first quest. Tunifus wanted me to collect 5 samples of Marshmerrow. They're used in restore health potions and are quite the handy ingredient to have. Apparently, the cult has an agreement with a farmer named Balor Salvu. Salvu lives near Pelagiad and grows the marrow. As a bit of a peace offering, Synnolian hands me a quality Fortify Strength potion to give to Balor. To be honest, I found the instructions on how to reach the farmer a little confusing. Tunifus said north of the road but south of Pelagiad. There are some houses in between the town square and the road, and some are even farms. However, none of them were Salvu's. You see, the missing clue here was the next part of the directions. West of the first bridge, south of Pelagiad. After wandering back and forth through the Ascadian Isles, I finally clued in on where the farm was. Balor was wandering around his land, and speaking with him, he happily accepted Synnolian's present. He asked what he could do for me, and that's when I brought up the Marshmerrow. Salvu said that the marrow was growing just beside us, and that I could help myself to the 5 samples. Before ending the conversation, he asked if there was anything else he could do for me. This is when I got a little greedy and asked him to teach me something. Fortunately, Salvu was a good sport about it, and he actually gifted me a book called The Cake and the Diamond. He's already committed it to memory, and therefore doesn't need it anymore. The Cake and the Diamond is an alchemy skill book, and especially for this questline, it can prove to be very useful. Heading to the Marshmerrow field, I picked all 5 samples rather quickly, and was soon good to go. Recalling to the chapels, I reported into Tunifus, and he rewarded me for my efforts. He handed me an apprentice mortar and pestle, as well as a standard restore health potion. The lay healer said that with them, I could start to make my own health potions. With that, thus ends the quest, gathering Marshmerrow. Chatting with Synnolian again, he tells me that he's been so busy and asks if I've had the chance to check in for an advancement. Doing so, I apparently met all of the requirements as I was promoted to the rank of novice. Continuing the conversation, Synnolian gives me my next set of orders. He wants to make some cure disease potions and in turn needs 5 samples of muck. According to Tunifus, the cult has an agreement with a farmer named Abishpulu Shand over in Nissus. Shand grows the muck outside his hut, and while in town, Synnolian wants me to pay a visit to Fort Darius and give Chaplain Ogrel 4 bargain restore health potions. As a possible introduction to the game's fast traveling system, Tunifus hands me 80 gold pieces and tells me to take the Siltstrider services, as walking would apparently be a long adventure. In classic questline fashion, the idea is that the player gets sent to other branches of the faction in order to see what other benefits, features, and perks are out there. Like I said earlier though, the key difference here is that all of the quest givers are in Ebonheart. So, for Chaplain Ogrel, the delivery is more so meant to have the favor returned in some way. Arriving in Nissus, I actually wasn't quite sure where the Shand Muck Sponge farm was. I ended up harvesting the muck from the Vabdis hut just outside of town. This still worked and I got my 5 samples, but I ended up ruining some poor farmer's harvest in return. As for the Shand Muck, it's actually located right by the Legion's barracks, which is relatively close to Fort Darius. Again, either patch works. I guess just for your role-playing morals, one might be the better option. As for Chaplain Ogrel, I found him in the lower section of the fort. Speaking with the orc, he welcomed me to Darius' shrine and extended his thanks for the restore health potions. In return, he offered me a favor, which of course I took him up on. Apparently, Synnolian suggested for the chaplain to teach me a trick of some kind, and Ogrel offers to show me one of 4 restoration spells: strength, willpower, speed, or luck. I also have the option to decline the offer, but one of these would actually prove very useful to my character in the long run. Bone Walkers are an enemy that I don't face very often, but when I do, they end up doing a number on my strength. Since that's really the only attribute that gets damaged on my character, I figured might as well learn how to restore it. So, Ogrel teaches me the spell, sends his regards to Synnolian, and sends me on my way. Recalling to the Imperial chapels, I reported to Tunifus and he rewarded me for my efforts. The lay healer gifted me a potion of cure common disease, an apprentice retort, and a book called the Alchemist's Formulary. While not a skill book, the formulary is actually a recipe book that instructs the player on how to make a variety of different potions. It's something that definitely would have come in handy pre-forums and walkthroughs. With that, thus ends the quest, Gathering Muck. Resuming the conversation with Tunifus, he told me to inquire about a possible promotion. Doing so, he granted me to the rank of Initiate. What's more, he then offered me a token of the cult's appreciation. In his words, since I'd proven to be a loyal and diligent member to the faction, Synnolian rewarded me with a Marin amulet. When used, the amulet fortifies speechcraft, restoration, mysticism, and conjuration, all for 5 points for 30 seconds. On to the next job, the Imperial instructed me to gather some Willow Anther, which is used in creating cure paralyzation potions. As for the source, well, Tunifus admits to stealing the Willow from someone named Gurak Grobagrat's house. Bagrat is a criminal, and while the lay healer doesn't condone stealing, he thinks about the dynamic and puts the needy first. Gurak's house is north of Ivek's foreign quarter. Tunifus calls him a smuggler, as it's common knowledge he deals skooma. The flowers can be found outside his house, so the job should be simple enough. However, Synnolian warns me not to enter his home, and stresses that I should not try and speak with the orc. Well, of course, when someone in Morrowind tells me not to do something, it piques my curiosity and I have to try it out. Bagrat's house is easily accessible via the road that leads north out of Ivek. Arriving at the Netch ranch, I found the willow flowers in pots just outside the front door. Picking 5 was no problem at all. There was no trouble whatsoever with the orc or the Komoda Tom. I could have recalled back to the Imperial chapels and would have been done with this quest. However, I really wanted to see Gurak's operation for myself. On the main floor of the plantation, there were 2 orcs, Gackenfeld and Dregs, and they were decked out in full sets of armor, guarding some kind of blocked door. Preparing myself for a fight, I cast an unlocking spell, but surprisingly, the bodyguards didn't care. Stepping on through, their gaze stayed elsewhere, and I was free to descend to the lower levels. Getting through another locked door, I turned the corner and spotted Bagrat as well as one of his accomplices. Gurak is a level 15 smuggler who wields an orcish warhammer. His partner, Velsa Celerin, is a level 4 alchemist, and she fights using magic. If the player is up for the possibly challenging fight, you can get access to some pretty interesting gear. There's plenty of tools for the budding alchemist, decent weapons and armor, as well as a whole bunch of moon sugar and skooma bottles. With the right buyer, these could go a long way for your pocket. Recalling to the Imperial chapels, I thought for sure that Tunifus was going to be angry with me or penalize me in some way. However, he ended up not really caring about Bagrat's death. In fact, he didn't even mention it. As a reward for my efforts, Synnolian gives me a potion of cure paralyzation, and he also hands me a book called The Four Suitors of Benetah. The Four Suitors is a restoration skill book, and again, comes in handy for the up-and-coming priest/cleric. With that, thus ends the quest, gathering Willow Anther. Chatting again with Synnolian, he gets straight into the next task. There's no promotion or random reward this time round. The lay healer wants 5 samples of Scrib jelly for some cure blight potions. He directs me over to the Shulk egg mine, southwest of Balmora, as Scribs are in abundance there. Tunifus warns me though that while the Scribs and Quama workers are non-hostile, the foragers and the warriors will be, so I should take caution. In order to help with the hunt and to see what's lurking around each corner, the lay healer teaches me a detect creature spell. Scribs can actually be found all across Vvardenfell. They're pretty easy to spot, especially from the main roads. What's more, they're even easier to hear as they let out this high-pitched screeching noise. So you don't need to go to the Shulk egg mine, but since they're highly concentrated in that one area, it's the most efficient way of collecting the jelly. As Synnolian said, the workers and the Scribs are no issue. Honestly, the worst part about this collection job is having these creatures block your path. Fortunately, there's no penalty for killing anything, so a simple slice or two with a sword will easily open the tunnel back up. Down here, you're bound to encounter the Quama foragers and even a warrior or two. They really aren't anything more than nuisance creatures. However, if you enter the Queen's Lair, there are actually some hostile miners. Civillo Althan and Daynila Valis are egg poachers, and while they're not difficult to defeat, if you're a really low-level character, you might have your work cut out for you. Some extra tips and tricks for gathering the Scrib jelly include speaking with some of the miners outside the mine. Dinok is the Redguard worker by the fire, and raising his disposition, plus asking about the Scrib jelly, he hands you over a free sample. On top of that, right outside the mines themselves, there are a few Scribs just wandering around, so that could be 3 samples before you even step foot into the mine. In any case, with all 5 ingredients gathered, I recalled to the Imperial chapels and reported to Tunifus. As a reward for my efforts, Synnolian gives me a potion of cure blight disease, a potion of cure poison, and an apprentice's alembic. With that, thus ends the quest, gathering Scrib jelly. Resuming the conversation with Tunifus, he suggests that I inquire about an advancement. Doing so, Synnolian promotes me to the rank of Acolyte. What's more, after that, he gives me a little bonus for all the work I've been putting in for the Imperial cult. The lay healer rewards me with a Stendaran belt. When used, the belt fortifies attack, unarmored, blunt, and enchant, all for 5 points for 30 seconds. Getting into the next task, Tunifus asks for 5 units of Corkbulb. Unsurprisingly, the cult has an agreement with the Ascadian Isles plantation owners, and the faction's been granted access to their crops. Synnolian suggests that I start with Arvel Manor, which is right behind the Dren plantation. It's well north of Vivec, and since there's no direct route there, he teaches me a spell called Swimmer's Blessing, which boosts my swim speed for 5 points for 30 seconds. At this point, you probably get the idea for Synnolian Tunifus' quests. It's a really nice story arc for those who are looking to learn more about alchemy, and if you were to pair it with some of the Mages Guild quests, you get off on a really good foot. Interesting to note is that for a lot of these quests, the player can simply go to any old shop and buy the ingredients. If you just wanted to fast track the story, that's 100% an option. However, the lay healer's missions teach you where to find certain ingredients, as some are region locked. They also teach you about the relations that the cult has, aka the perks that come with your 50 gold donation. These are the various farmers and landowners around Vvardenfell who depend on the shrine for their potions, and in turn, all the shrine asks for, apart from their ingredients, is that they hear about the 9 divines. As of this moment, the Arvel Manor is marked on my map, and from Vivec, it's pretty easy to get to, whether that's through walking, swimming, or levitation. Arriving, you'll notice the crop fields, the manor, the slaves, their shacks, and of course, the owners. Unfortunately, there's not much lore or info that comes out of this plantation while you're working with the cult. This area does have a lot of quests related to House Lalu, and there's certainly more story here than meets the eye. But for now, all the player can do is pick the Corkbulb and be on their way. The bulb plants are on the southwestern side of the farmland, and securing 5 samples is relatively easy. Once that was done, I recalled to the Imperial chapels and reported to Synnolian. As a reward, the Imperial gifts me 1 potion of Cure Common Disease and 1 standard Restore Health potion. With that, thus ends the quest, gathering Corkbulb root. Chatting again with Tunifus, he got straight into my next quest. The lay healer would like for me to secure 5 units of rat meat. This is in order to create some cure poison potions. He suggests that I look at the underworks in Vivec City, as the sewer systems there are crawling with the vermin. Synnolian warns me though that the underworks are also home to some unsavory characters and places, so I should proceed with caution. At this point, there are only 2 quests left for Tunifus' story arc. Everything's been beginner friendly, but you also might have noticed that Synnolian drops some sort of hint for a grander adventure. For example, with the Willow flowers, there was Gurak Grobagar. Now, with the rat meat, he says to be careful of the other things that might be lurking beneath Vivec, and trust me, there's a lot down here. The one and only cantid I ventured into was St. Delen. Traversing to the canal works and then the underworks was no issue. The rats were abundant here, and honestly, securing the 5 samples of rat meat was over with in about a minute. But again, there are other interesting things down here. Most are fairly dangerous and will wipe the floor with newer players, but once you get past them, they can yield some truly valuable treasures. For example, the St. Delen Underworks holds the shrine of Sheogorath. There are 4 hostile NPCs in and around the area, and they get up to level 18. If you manage to get by them, the spoils of Inipalat are yours and you can undergo Sheogorath's Daedric Shrine quest. This is just one of the many examples, as pretty much all of the cantons in Vivec City hold some sort of interesting person, place, or thing in their underworks. If you're brave enough to venture through each one, it surely won't disappoint. With the 5 samples of rat meat in my inventory, I recalled to the Imperial chapels and reported to Tunifus. As a reward for my efforts, the lay healer gifts me a potion of cure poison and 2 books, The Wraith's Wedding Dowry and Charwich Konig Volume 1. Synnolian says that since each task is getting trickier, these books will prove to be pretty useful. They're both skill books, and they both improve the reader's unarmored skill. With that, thus ends the quest, gathering rat meat. Resuming the conversation with Tunifus, I asked him for an advancement in rank. This is where the Imperial promoted me to the rank of Adept. As for the final quest from the lay healer story arc, Synnolian wanted me to bring him 1 sample of Netch leather. This requires the player to hunt and slay a Netch. According to Tunifus, the best area to start in is by Balor Salvu's house in the Ascadian Isles. He does warn me though to stay away from the Betty Netch, as they're apparently more dangerous than their male counterparts. Honestly, you can find Netch just about anywhere on Vardenfell. They're non-hostile creatures, meaning that you can start the fight off by getting a simple cheap shot in. Really, the only thing to consider is that almost all of them will be hovering in the air, so you might need some form of levitation or a ranged attack. For my case, I remembered seeing a whole bunch of them just outside of Gurak Grobagart's house, which was north of Vivec. This obviously makes sense because the orc's money front was being a Netch rancher. There aren't any penalties to attacking and killing these creatures, so you're free to go hog wild. While the Bull Netch are stronger opponents as they deal more damage and have more health, the Betty Netch have a higher aggression rate, so that's probably why Tunifus said to stay away from them. Regardless, these creatures will put up a good fight for lower level characters, but they shouldn't be much of an issue for higher level ones. 1 sample of leather is all you need, but getting carried away by the hunt, I ended up collecting more than my fair share. Once the bloodlust left my eyes, I recalled to the Imperial chapels and reported to Synnolian one last time. As a reward for my efforts, Tunifus gifted me 5 quality magicka resistance potions and a belt of Belina's soothing balm. According to the Imperial, Belina was a patron saint of Mara, and she's a role model for all members of the cult. After that, Synnolian finishes by saying that he has no more jobs for me. He suggests that I speak to the other members of the shrine, like the almoners and the shrine sergeants, as they may have different forms of work. Looking at the enchanted belt, it restores 3 to 12 points of health for 1 second on self. With that, thus ends the quest, gathering Netch leather. Honestly, Tunifus' quests were nice and simple. As a higher level character who has a lot of skin in the game, you might find it a little too entry level and or elementary. These were all essentially fetch quests and didn't require much difficulty or skill. However, as someone who doesn't know much about alchemy in the Elder Scrolls, I found a lot of the information here to be quite useful. I learned what some of these ingredients were used for, I learned where they grew, and I received a set of alchemical gear in the process. Something to remember for Morrowind is that while it's enticing to do every single questline, they were made and tailored for a specific class of players. For example, the Imperial cult is perfect for priests, healers, clerics, and just about anyone who isn't playing an outright warrior or combat-heavy class. However, with that being said, there are more than a handful of quests in this questline that heavily rely on the player's combat prowess, and I'll be getting into those next.